Well, we're going to start out with talking about something, or clarifying something that was said in the earlier video. Diesel is actually more efficient than gasoline, so just kind of ignore that little blurb there. But it is found in smaller amounts, partially because it has a higher blend. So not only on the natural gas.
So, natural gas. Natural gas is found near oil, is composed primarily of methane with traces of propane, butane, ethane, carbon dioxide, oxygen, nitrogen, and hydrogen sulfide. It is conventional when easily accessible. It is unconventional when it is found deeper underground or is otherwise difficult to retrieve, and is formed similar to oil over millions of years with decomposing plant matter and animal matter, typically underwater or near swampland. So there are two main ways that natural gas is formed, or at least there are two theories on how it's formed right now. So the first is that natural gas was formed through methanogenic bacteria in swamplands. The theory basically goes that decomposers back then would primarily make methane instead of whatever byproducts they make right now. So when they decomposed anything, it would create, or it would form methane. And if something got buried, the methane would become trapped in the ground, leading to natural gas. Next. The other theory we've already gone over is the thermogenic gas theory, which is formed through heat and pressure of very deep matter. While both these theories hold water in arguments, it's pretty likely that both of them are true in some form. Biogenic gas would be closer to the surface, and thermogenic gas would be deeper underground.
Never even heard of that.
So, Russia has the majority of natural gas of a single country. However, the Middle East has the most in terms of a region, followed by Europe and Eurasia. Shale gas is another form of how we get natural gas. It is trapped in shale rock formations, and it is not conventional. And possibly the worst way to retrieve any natural resource is required to get it: fracking.
Fracking was an essay question last year, or the year before.
So,
And here's fracking.
So, fracking, or hydraulic fracturing, is the process of putting high-powered water combined with sand and other chemicals into the ground to break rock layers through aquifers to get to the gas. It is the only potentially direct water supply pollutant that is currently known, and it is the most dangerous thing in terms of polluting anything.
All right, so based on the definition alone, tell me everything wrong with this process. It destroys habitats. Why? Okay, you're breaking ground, which I mean is just destroying everything in its range. What else? Okay, yeah.
Chemicals. Unnatural chemicals.
Well, we're not putting natural chemicals. Read it again.
Unnatural.
Okay, so we're adding chemicals. We're actually polluting. What else? One more.
taking apart the aquifer.
What?
Destroying the aquifer.
Well, yeah. Huh?
Polluting the groundwater.
We're polluting groundwater, so pollution is a problem. Pollution because you're adding chemicals. Pollution because you're breaking up land, and water will take all the broken up particles of land and run off with that. One more. Read it. I'll pause. See. So the last problem is you're using a renewable resource that has, in some areas, become potentially renewable, which is water. A lot of water, lots of water to drive this process. So pollution, land disturbance, water. Remember, no word. I got this again on this test.
Just as a quick example of what happens when fracking can occur, in, I believe it was Kentucky, no, Kansas, about 3 or 4 years ago, they started fracking near a small town, and a woman could set her water on fire.
Women's or what?
Her water on fire.
The chemical. Alright, move on.
So, go back.
Go back.
This is how natural gas is transported. It goes from the rig to the processing plant, which processes any impurities out of natural gas. It is then liquefied into a transferable state, is transported, regasified, and it goes to industry and consumers for use.
Great little diagram.
So, how natural gas is used to heat your home. First, a boiler, you use a boiler to fire it with natural gas. Steam goes in the turbine, turbine makes electricity, electricity powers your house. And the excess heat from the steam can be used to heat your house, as well as reheat the boiler in order to cool your house through more electricity.
And I want to interject also, in my house, where I live, we have a boiler, except we get gas directly from the company, and then we use electricity, and it will burn it and heat it. So in your own home, you're heating the water directly.
So, pros and cons of natural gas. It is cleaner than oil.
You gotta think of this at this point. You got gas, cleanest. Then you got liquid, a little more dirty, and the solid, which is the coal, the dirtiest. Does that make sense? When you think of, the concentrations, its heating ability, all these things. Okay, keep going.
It has a high heating value. It has no odor as natural gas, though products from natural gas can have odors. There is no physical waste to deal with from it. It is lighter than air, so if it somehow gets released, it floats up instead of down. And it can be used to make plastics as liquid natural gas in the event that we run out of oil. It is extremely explosive and therefore difficult to transport. It requires several energy transformations to get anything useful out of it. And as I've said before, fracking is the worst way to retrieve any potential energy source.
I'm just gonna interject that when you get a question of, is it an advantage if it's difficult to transport, or is it a disadvantage? It's both. And this happens a lot with advantages and disadvantages. So always remember that. Same thing with hydroelectric. What's the advantage and disadvantage? Flooding. Okay.
Now we're going to talk about another non-renewable energy source, which is coal. Coal is the most common natural capital in the United States. That's why 50% of our power plants are actually coal-fired plants. It is also the dirtiest fossil fuel because, as Mr. Rangel said, it is a solid. And I'll get more into why it's dirty how coal was created. Because it's natural capital, at least in the United States, it's cheap to obtain. And the way it's obtained is through strip or underground mining. Strip is, they go to a mountainside and dissect a layer, and then they pull it out as if it's closest to the surface. If not, they'll have to do underground mining, or they'll have to dig deep underground and take it out.
What's that layer they remove called? These are vocab words for mining.
Overburden?
Overburden. And what is the trace waste called? All right, who has mining anyways? Okay, remember those. We'll get back to that.
The
Go.
waste and the
Okay.
overburden.
Next part.
Next.
Coal formation. Coal formed
Love with that picture.
millions of years ago when it was in a swamp. It was the brush. Imagine the peat in the bog. Then the peat dies. It sinks to the bottom, and the moss sinks to the bottom and becomes peat. Peat is the first in the stages of forming coal. After that, it is, imagine, I say millions of years because the peat keeps dying, and so more and more pressure is being applied over time, as well as heat as you can see by the image. So the next stage and the first stage of coal is lignite. Lignite is a point between peat and coal because it looks like carbonized plant material. And then you have coal, which the next picture will just go into detail as to the coal. From the top left, going to the right and then down, first you can see what peat looks like. After that, we have lignite, bituminous, and anthracite. The dirtiest of those coals is bituminous, and then as more and more heat pressure is applied, the cleaner that it, in a sense, becomes. Now, I have told you that coal is the dirtiest. That's because it came from plant material. So you have the chomp PS, and one of the problems is that when you burn it, you're burning the sulfur. And when you burn sulfur, it will mix with oxygen and be released into the air. Next picture. Or next slide. There's a coal power plant. So you have the coal, it goes on the conveyor belt, it goes into the grinder, they grind it up because it's easier to ignite that way. Then they put it at the bottom of the burner, they light the coal. The coal heats water, and the water turns to turbine, which turns to generator. That's the basic process. Can you go back a slide?
Sure.
And over time, the more time that you apply to the coal, the more efficient it is at releasing heat. So the last stage, anthracite, produces the most heat. The problem is that for you to get to that stage, you would need a lot of pressure. And as a result, it would be deep underground, so it's not easily accessible. So actually, the most abundant of these forms of coal is bituminous. And it's also the cheapest. Next slide. Now there's another use for coal. Coal can be used as synthetic gas. So what happens is the coal is dropped into hopper, gas is applied, and then they're co-fired together, and then that is used to heat water, to turn your turbine, to produce electricity.
This was a question that the majority of you missed on the last test. The co-fired. When you combine two, I know you were guessing because you didn't know what that word meant. So yeah, not yesterday's, the prior test, the last test we took on it. Let's not move me. Okay. I'm going back.
Now here are the pros and cons to coal.
Sorry.
Now the first pro actually depends on your region, and that is abundance. Coal is abundant, at least for the United States. It is also, because it's abundant here, it's cheap, it's affordable. That's why 50% of your power is produced like that. Now, coal has, probably besides nuclear, has the most cons in that when you're burning it, whenever you burn organic matter, you're releasing chunk PS into the air. But for example, that looks green, but it's yellow. That's sulfur. So sulfur is released into the air, and then that could mix with water vapor, either turning it to dry or wet acid deposition, acid rain. And the last picture was, this is something that they could ask you on the exam, is coal at a time, when they were burning it, it released mercury. And so they found that kids living near coal power plants, this was during the Industrial Revolution also, when they burnt it for industry, kids had a higher level of mercury because it was a contaminant in it. Now we're going to talk about nuclear.
I'm gonna pause.